Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and today we're going to talk about the whole Pokemon Van Gogh collaboration fiasco, whatever you want to call it. It's what everybody's talking about right now. In case you missed it, which is pretty difficult to do, Pokemon decided to collaborate with the Van Gogh Museum. This is something that we definitely want to see more of. I think everyone would agree if we got any type of artist collaboration with Pokemon, Monet, Salvador Dali, pick your poison, that's a win-win. So what I'm going to do here is break down the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I'm also going to compare this release to the Screen promo release we had about 5 years ago, because there's a lot of people I think who weren't around back then. So I think it's good to just go over that and compare them, because they probably aren't going to be as identical as I think people expect them to be. So start with the positives. Number one, the artwork is pretty solid. We got Pikachu in a hat, we got Eevee in a slightly different hat, we got Smeargle just showing up because his tail's a paintbrush, we had Sunflora, we have some Komiya art, we have some Sao art. I think overall there's a nice variety to enjoy. Also, another really fun thing was the shared experience that I had, especially with that E4 thread that had like 700 posts in 2 days. It really felt like Worlds, where you had people at the museum, showing pictures and information in real time. I just felt connected in a way that I think is very rare, especially now in our social media hellscape that we're in. It was just a lot of fun to see that. I think this really was something that everyone felt like on a universal level, if that makes sense. So I think those are the two big positives. The TLDR is really cool art and fun time, good vibes, whatever. That's very easy to enjoy. Now this takes us into the bad and the ugly. Every single time Pokemon does something fun like this, they always underestimate the amount of sweaty scalpers who are ready to just stampede and flip something for $20 to $50 to $100, and that is exactly what happened. There was madness at the museum. You had people in the gift shop that were just like trampling one another for postcards and tote bags. I will never understand it. Like the anything but get a jobbers. Like these people, anything but a job. Like just go get a normal job and you'll make at least that amount of money in one day. Like it just blows my mind. So this negative stereotype that unfortunately has a lot of truth to it in Pokemon reared its head again. Team Rocket is now an international company. They got scalpers in the US, they got them in Japan, they got them in Europe, they got them all over the globe. So it's something that again, very easy positive of cool artwork, fun time, very obvious negative of these guys going in here, trampling one another for postcards. You don't want to see it. And outside of that, you had a lot of, the physical scalpers and the digital scalpers. Like you had the Taroses and the Porygons or whatever. You had people online doing the same deal at Pokemon Center. That stuff got botted out instantly. The website on the actual museum had like this weird 503 error that would like happen, but then also you would somehow be in someone else's shopping cart. Like at that point, I'm like questioning how far am I going to go to buy Pokemon merchandise? Like they're leaking personal information because there's just so many people trying to access the site at once. So it was definitely mayhem. There was definitely madness at the museum. It was a lot going on digitally, physically, and I think that takes us to the first like big contrast between the Screen promos, because Screen promos were never available at the Pokemon Center. Like you could not buy them online stateside. You couldn't even buy them online in Japan. In fact, a couple of them weren't even at the Pokemon Center at all. Only 3 of those cards were, and they were only with physical in-store purchases. Where the Pikachu and the Mimikyu was outside. Pikachu was more similar to how you would get the card going through the exhibit now of Van Gogh. But that was it. There was no other option of, hey, we're going to throw it online for you guys. We're going to give it to the UK or wherever else. That just wholesale was not happening. So that's one of the big differences. And of course, while this was going on, Pokemon Center did its typical No Country for Old Men and, started banning people and things like that. And all this because they put a hat on Pikachu. It reminds me of like when Michael Jackson was like at his peak popularity and he'd like pop up out of the stage and just like stand there. And the crowd be losing their minds. Like people were just going like, they're like fainting and screaming so loud. And then like 30 seconds later, he'd just take off his glasses and the volume would go higher. That's what this is. Like Pokemon's demand is at like a bowling point all the time. And then you just throw a hat on Pikachu and people just go even crazier. So that's what we experienced. It was a mix again of like, if there is a silver lining for this, there's so much interest in Pokemon. It's such a cute, quaint idea to, involve historic pieces like this, whether it's a Screen promo or Van Gogh or whatever it is, or maybe other future, collaborations. It's just a really fun idea. So there's a lot of good and of course there's a shout out to that as well. But I think there are solutions to this. I know the first one everyone says is supply. like, yeah, the obvious answer to high demand is supply. However, I think in this case, there's an issue of processing. I actually think there's a decent amount of supply, at least if it's not already out there, it will be and or is promised to be or said to be. I think the process, at least online, should be more like what Lego does or these other companies where they're like, hey, only 1 or 2 or 5 per address. Because there's guys like flexing, yeah, my bots has got like 100 of these. I got 200 of these. It's like, what are we doing? Like, these people are like running bots, got like 100 of these cards. It's like, just imagine trying to move all that. And it's going to be a race to the bottom. Because if you got 100 cards, what does the other scalper have? What do they have? You know, it's like, that's the thing, is that the supply, I think, isn't really as much of the issue. I think it's more the process of how there should be some type of like limitation. I don't know if it's, for some reason, when I try to get some new Lego thing or whatever, they do it well. You know, of course, certain things get sold out, but they still have a better flow where I feel like it spreads more, like the demand is more spread, where these bots on Pokemon Center are just brutal. Like, it's no country for old men, meaning like Pokemon Center is 5 steps behind. You know, like, I'm getting a banned message. I'm not banned. It's like I'm picking sunflower petals. I'm like, oh, I'm banned now. I'm not banned. And now I got to do whatever. I got to make sure I'm not a robot or whatever it is. Meanwhile, actual bots are just like, yeah, give me that. Like, they're just raking it in. So, yeah, I think there is definitely a processing problem, you know, with the Pokemon Center side of things that they, again, overlook, because from their angle, they're like, yeah, we're just focused on doing this really special thing. And they're not really getting into the nitty gritty, partly because they're probably not aware. Like, when people's like, hey, how come Pokemon doesn't understand this? Because Pokemon's, I'm not trying to defend them, but they're a massive company. Massive. It's not just like me and like, you know, E4 or whatever. Like, there's so many like branches, and I'm sure certain people who are in charge of designing it and putting this together, they're not aware of like these like sweaty scalpers who have no lives. They're just ready to do whatever. They're not aware. And maybe, you know, they should have someone who makes them aware. But the bottom line is, that's why I think this keeps happening, is they're just focused on like the cool idea of it. And at least, you know, silver lining here, they said they're going to release more of these to the Pokemon Center. And from the people, like in that thread, who were in the Netherlands, they said the museum still has, you know, cards that they're giving out. At least as a recording. So those are positives. You know, if we're going to get more supply, that's a good thing. And also keep in mind, like, all the Pokemon Center orders, even these crazy Team Rocket grunts, you know, botting them out, that still hasn't hit the market. Like, some of this stuff still has not processed. So I do think the process is part of it. I think that's the biggest part of it, because I think there's actually a decent amount of supply. It's just, it needs to be more spread instead of bottleneck. And just the irony of like me having to do like, are you a human? Meanwhile, like, these bots are just like burning through hundreds of cards. It's just, the irony is so great. But another like fun idea I had is Pokemon should start if this doesn't work, Pokemon should start making stipulations that would eliminate these scalpers. Number one, you get this promo if you show us a tax return. You get this promo if you actually pay taxes on eBay sales. You get this promo if you've had a job in the past year. You get this promo if you've never worn a Flame shirt. Like, there's certain things they could do. As sarcastic as I'm being, there are certain real things they could do to really like divert these scalpers. For me, and for a lot of the people who are probably watching this channel, a lot of us who are like fully invested in this and enjoy, you know, collectibles the way we do, for us it's a no-brainer. But again, for these companies who just aren't on the ground floor as much, for them, they're just unaware. You know, I'm not trying to make excuses, just the reality of like, you know, the difference of what their role is and what like our role is. Like, we're on the ground floor with the hashtag community. They're just like trying to create and, you know, this event and make it all go through. So the other thing I have here, which might be the most valuable part if you're still paying attention, this is the same conversation with a different card. We talked about this before with Shining Fates ETB. We've talked about this before with Delivery Charizard. We've talked about it before with so many other items. And I think the number one takeaway is all of them are cheaper today. When they were at their noisiest, that was probably the worst time to buy them. You know, I remember Special Delivery Charizard was nauseating. Like, there were so many videos speculating on this card. Back when it was just like flirting with us, like when we had a preview of the inadvertent release copy or copies that you saw. That whole thing, everybody was talking about. You'd see like a cardinal outside your window. You're like, oh, is that Special Delivery Charizard? Is that a sign? Am I special? You know, like, people were losing their minds because there's just so much noise. And the piece of advice I want to give here is that the ratio, the noise to value ratio right now for Van Gogh and Special Delivery Charizard or whatever it was at the time, it's way off. It's just so noisy. There's so much light. There's so much spotlight on it right now. And I think people forget that when you look at like the hierarchy of fundamentals, FOMO is real at the top of the mountain, because the top of the mountain is really hard to do. You know, it's highly optimized. You have to have a ton of money. Those are the rarest things, et cetera, et cetera. The air is much thinner up there. But this Pikachu card is down here at the bottom. You know, it's at base camp. Like, you can enjoy a Cliff Bar and just chill with your friends. Like, it's a very comfortable area. However, this noise is creating FOMO for people, when in reality, the fundamentals of the card's probably going to be printed again. At least that's what we're told. Currently, as a recording, there's 1,200 listings on eBay. It's been like 72 hours. We're not even like days yet. We're in like Majora's Mask window of like hours still, like counting hours. Like, it's only been 72 hours. And there's already 1,200 listings on eBay. Some of them are sub $100. You know, the takeaway here is there's a lot of noise right now, and we've been down this road before. Remember when there was a lot of noise with Shining Fates ETB? Remember that in 2020, 2021, somewhere in there? What's the price today when it's not as noisy? It's half of what it was then. Remember all that noise I was just joking about with Special Delivery Charizard at its peak? You know, people were ready to pay thousands of dollars for these, you know, factory stolen cards, or whatever it was. What's the price of it today when it's not as noisy, when there aren't thousands of videos being made about it? You know, that's, I feel like, where we are with Van Gogh, is where it's a good card. None of these are bad cards. These are all solid cards. It's just we're in a time right now where it's super noisy. And even if the price doesn't really go down much, let's even say it goes up a bit, I would personally rather buy it at a more chill, quiet time where I'm like, okay, this is just what it is. This is what the market value is. Because I don't have anything that can distract from that. You know, right now there is a ton of chaos. There is a ton of noise. You know, there are a ton of like scalpers stampeding. So there is a lot of going on right now. Once that chills out, I'd honestly rather pay like 100 to 150 for a card 6 months from now, where everything's like copacetic, than, you know, save money in this crazy chaos, because you don't know what's going to happen. Because buying that could be like trying to catch the dagger. And when we've been told by the company who makes the cards they plan on releasing more of them, and also the people who are there at the ground floor of the museum who are like, yeah, they still are handing these out, or they plan to hand out more, you know, you might not want to grab that dagger too quickly. So that's the rundown on the whole Van Gogh situation. I think it's what you want to see. I think this is what we want more of. I think everyone agrees that if you make beautiful artwork and, you know, mix it with something that I think is more mainstream, I don't really see the downside outside of just managing these scalpers, which again, put the thing in place on Pokemon Center with the addresses to only let like 1 or 2 or 5 or whatever it is, you know, to one address. I think that would help out a lot, because they did make this available. To tie in screen promos one more time, you can never buy those online. They were never available online to buy, especially just 2 clicks away or whatever on Pokemon Center US. That was never a thing. You know, that was not something you could do. So they did try to do a better job here, you know, when everyone's getting heated at Pokemon, which I agree, like, I want to see it streamlined, but this was better than what Screams were. Like, these were more accessible than, like, Scream promos, but scalpers, man. And one other thing to say with that is, like, I hold an opinion where I'm like, yeah, they're obviously dumb, but that they're like rotten fruit on a tree. Like, it's such low-hanging fruit. I'm like, yeah, I'm not even gonna even look at you as food anymore. Like, just get out of my way. Like, I just completely disregard scalpers. I only look at them in relation to like what is affecting, you know, the market, and what's that going to play out in relation to noise versus value ratio and things like that. Because again, things are very noisy right now, and I don't think these cards are at the top of the mountain. I don't think these are less than 100 copies or less than 500 copies. You have more than 1,200 on eBay right now as we speak. So, you know, I think the fundamentals and the noise really aren't, you know, connecting right now. And again, I'd rather just buy during a less turbulent time, even if I end up paying a little bit more. I think it just adds consumer confidence. But that's, again, just stating my opinion. You can do whatever you want. But yeah, that's what I have on the whole Van Gogh thing. Hopefully I broke everything down and complained and, you know, with you enough, or commiserate with you guys enough, because it was a weird mix of very, very special connectivity along with the usual, you know, frustrations that we deal with within the hobby. So, you know the deal. Let me know how I feel, and that's pretty much it, guys. Till next time.